Hey guys, I'm not doing all this stuff again. I just wanted to show these ones off because I keep forgetting I have them. These are actually, so if memory serves, these are the 3D glasses that I wore to see the Avengers back in 2012. They're a little dusty right now, but I like these things. Let me show those off. I got a monitor on the side because I can finally do that now. I just thought this was a kind of a cool, clever thing. And I brought out the bomber jacket because I had it for the Wonder Woman little kind of mini review. And I thought, hey, that looks kind of like the coat that the Vulture wears. That might be kind of neat. So let's talk Spider-Man.
The world's changing, boys.
It's time we change too.
This is my chance to prove myself.
We have a Spanish quiz.
You gotta get better at this part of the job.
I don't understand. I'm intimidated.
Oh, hey. My friends are up there. Hey, where are you going? What are you hiding, Peter?
Spider-Man has one of the weirder movie histories. I think the only hero that's had more weird kind of reboots has been Batman, because we had Adam West, we had the Burton Schumacher set, we had the Nolan set, and now we've got the new Zack Snyder batch. And then for Spider-Man, we had the Sam Raimi version starring Tobey Maguire. We had the Mark Webb version starring Andrew Garfield, and now we have this new one that stars Tom Holland, who is awesome. He's so good. A lot of people talk about the issues that previous Spider-Men have had. You have Tobey Maguire, who played up the emotional side very well, but he didn't have a lot of toughness. And when he was being really tough and like, it always looked kind of silly. It was like a cartoon character, kind of trying to like, well, I'm a big bad man, I can do what I want. And like, it never seemed that convincing. On the other side, you have Andrew Garfield, who played up the snarky punk kind of like, hey, what's up sort of thing. But then when it came time for him to be emotional, it was hard to buy it. Part of that is because anytime they brought the characters together, they did a really bad job of doing backstory stuff. So you wind up with this kind of like empty, like, I promise you this is my best friend Harry, just believe me, okay? Not Harry, his son, Ozzy. So for this one, Tom Holland, you have a nice mix of both where he's a nice kid, but he does have kind of some snark. He jokes around a little bit, and when he gets tough and when he gets angry, you believe it. There are definitely some moments in the movie where you see real panic, where you see him under a lot of stress and actually lose his cool, and not in like a cute sort of kind of way. It's definitely like some heavy stuff. So Spider-Man Homecoming is Spider-Man and Peter Parker's first full movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He got a brief scene, well, two scenes, I guess, in Captain America Civil War. He gets enlisted by Tony Stark to help his team kind of even the odds against Captain America and his side. And we don't really find out too much more about Peter in that movie other than that he came to help. He got a little bit hurt, and Tony seemed to feel pretty personally responsible for that. This movie is for Peter and for Tony a direct follow-up to that. And the movie does show off some other perspectives on both the Avengers, where this guy came from, the first Avengers, and Captain America Civil War. Not just from the side of Peter, but also from the side of Adrian Toomes, a.k.a. the Vulture. You get to see from both of them how the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the events of this stuff have been shaping these characters over the past ambiguous number of years. The movie's... All right, so right out of the bat, the movie shows you some of the aftermath of the Battle for New York, which is what the events of the Avengers are called in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then it says 8 years later, and it shows off stuff from Civil War, which isn't entirely accurate. To nerd it out for a minute, there's only about 4 years that take place that happen between Avengers 1 and Captain America 3. I think it's the same sort of situation that we had with like Guardians of the Galaxy the first time. Actually, no, Guardians fixed it. For Guardians Volume 2, they did the X years later, and it isn't present year. It's like, I think it's only 3 months after Guardians 1. But it's not the point. So you get to see a little bit of what is bringing these two main characters, being Peter Parker, Adrian Toomes, into this conflict. And I have to say the CGI looks really good. There's one set of practical effects that looked really bad, but we will get to that later because it takes place like right in the middle of like the climactic stuff. They do a really good job of making the story about Peter trying to balance his life. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man series did a okayish job about that. They made him a high school senior. He graduates. I think in Spider-Man 3, he's trying to propose to Mary Jane. And you sort of see him trying to balance his life, but it's from a very distant sort of place. So you see him kind of trying to like keep his life together, but you don't really see the day-to-day of it all that much. Same thing with his aunt, with Aunt May. You don't see a whole lot of what he has to do to make that work. You just kind of get told in like a montagey sort of way, like, "Whoa, this is really tough." This same thing goes with Andrew Garfield. You see almost none, if I remember correctly, in the Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man series. You see almost none of the high school life that he's dealing with at the same time. You see a lot of him with Aunt May, who I think was played by Sally Field, but you don't really see what every day is like. With this one, they play it very different, where like you are following over the course of, I guess, a couple of weeks probably. But for the first for the first probably half hour or so, you're mostly limited to a single day, which is, I think the day after. It's about 2 months after Captain America Civil War, and you're seeing what Peter's up to. You see him hanging out and working with the new suit, and just kind of getting used to it and doing his thing. You actually get to see one thing that's great. There was some of the problems that have happened in the older Spider-Man movies is that a lot of what he did seemed a little too simple and clean. In the Raimi version, I've seen it compared to like a Disney attraction where like everything's kind of plasticky and a little awkward, and the fights are like so like like it's so overacted that it gets a little cheesy. The Garfield stuff was a little better, but I think the bulk of that was CGI. I mean, they obviously have a ton of CGI with this too, but they also had a lot of good practical effects of like just quick little whoop and like swinging into stuff, and they do it pretty nicely. I think they actually have, there's a shot where he enters his bedroom very sneakily to avoid being seen by Aunt May, and he does it by crawling on the ceiling, and the way he does it, it doesn't look like he's dangling from something. It looks like he's actually on the ceiling, and then he eventually like kind of climbs down and gets onto the floor. I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if there's any evidence of it out there yet, but I'm kind of curious if that was done with a rotating room. So a full box set where the camera's mounted on like a tripod and everything, including the camera, moves. And so what you end up with is a shot where the camera sees the room very statically, but everything in the room can the gravity's different. He's in a basically skin-tight outfit, so it's hard to you don't really see much moving around. So I don't think you see anything moving around, so it's hard to tell. Okay, so one thing that is kind of neat about this movie is, in the past, one of the things that bothered me the most about both previous Spider-Man series is that in a good story, in my opinion, the good guy in some way contributes to how the bad guy exists in one way or another, or how the conflict arises, as opposed to, hey, there's this bad thing going on, hey, you guys come this way and blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, I think a good movie has both of those characters somewhat intertwined. However, there are times when it goes too far and becomes a little bit contrived, and that was a big problem with both previous Spider-Man series, where you had Green Goblin, who is the main character's best friend's dad, and you have Doc Ock, who is your sort of mentor, sort of boss, something or other, and then you get to 3, and here's Sandman, the guy who killed your uncle, except he didn't kill your uncle, his buddy killed your uncle, except he also had a different thing going on with that too. And also, the younger of the Osborns, your best friend, is now a bad guy. And also, by the way, Venom is also here, and he's attached to you, but now he's attached to the new bad guy, which is the guy at work who's a dick to you. Like, everyone is 1 degree of separation away from Peter Parker. And then you get to Amazing Spider-Man, and it's his science teacher, and then it's... Actually, you know what? Electro is about as far away as they've gotten so far. Because in 2... you had Green Goblin, who was, again, his best friend, and you had Electro, who was just a guy who he met on the street and influenced him enough where he got obsessed with him and then kind of got angry. They didn't write it well, but at the very least, I appreciated that Electro, whose character name I don't fucking know, I appreciated that he at least wasn't like, oh, I'm your best friend or your girlfriend or whatever. Like, it was so close that it didn't really feel realistic. This movie does away with that. It mostly does away with that. There's some spoilers that we will talk about later, but what's interesting is that this one fits a lot more into the Marvel universe as a whole. The starting point has to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large. The end of it involves how everyone's going to move forward in the MCU from there. One of the more difficult things with the other movies is Spider-Man was alone in terms of being a hero. There were no other superheroes, just Spider-Man, which caused a couple problems. One, because if me or you just were, walking down the street and you see some dude in spandex just like swinging between the skyscrapers, I don't think anyone's reaction would be like, oh, cool. It'd be like, holy fucking shit, what the hell was that? And mass panic ensues. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they've got dudes in flying armor suits. You've got giant monster men. You've got aliens. You've got different human-looking aliens. You've got super soldiers. Like, there's so much that's happened to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that Spider-Man makes sense and is actually reasonable in terms of, like, being around and stuff, and people aren't going to just immediately freak the fuck out. And what's interesting too is that they play it up. I mentioned before, like, other Spider-Man were a little too perfect. This one, he fucks up a lot. Like, he's very clumsy. He's still kind of getting used to the hero gig. Even just when he's doing his neighborhood racket, he fucks up a couple of those too. I don't want to spoil specifically how or what he does, because it's a damn good movie, and I recommend it highly. But I like that they're making Spider-Man more human. Because that is it for me. Spider-Man was always my favorite Marvel character. I was Batman on the DC side, and I was Spider-Man on the Marvel side. And the reason was very simple. It was that Peter Parker was still someone who had a real life that they were trying to deal with, in addition to being a superhero. And that's part of what drew me to the TV show Heroes as well, was all these people with powers, but they're trying to, like, be normal folks too. So Spider-Man getting to have some humanity and be dealing with problems and being super awkward in school and being kind of the loser, it was pretty rad. There was a radical shift in a lot of the casting, because the Spider-Man comic books are historically kind of vaguely 50s themed, and they don't take place in the 50s, but it's a very jocks versus nerds, preppy kind of thing. This one does away with that entirely. I don't think there's a single jock character that is in the movie at all. You have nearly everybody is cast across races and all that stuff, and it's fine. I'm a little bit bummed at how angry people have gotten over that. It's not like it's not like we're doing an Abraham Lincoln movie and it's being played by like an Asian woman with, I don't know, who really hates hats. Like, like it's a movie based on a comic book that has been rewritten and re-universed so many times that one of the biggest flaws in that series is how they tried to make a clone, and everything goes fucking ridiculous insane from there. But I think that the race lift, as it gets called, is totally acceptable. I think it was a fresh feeling to it, because basically every main player in Spider-Man and in the traditional comics are like white, blonde, blue-eyed. Like, it's boring. There's a lot of attention paid to kind of rewriting some of those characters too. It makes sense if that Peter's in like a more of like a science-y kind of magnet school where everybody's going to be pretty damn smart, as opposed to him going to just some random whatever public school, but he's like a complete fucking genius and whatever. Like, it doesn't make as much sense in the other movies. In this one, they kind of give it a bit more of an update. Flash Thompson is a smart dude who is not as smart as Peter, but he's also still kind of a dick. And like, you get these pieces that are all the central kind of core idea of these characters, and updates them for today, because 2010s and the 1990s, early 2000s are pretty different in terms of how we all are and stuff. I mean, biggest difference I can think of as someone who was 14, maybe 15 when Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man came out versus being 30 now when this one comes out, is like video games. Being a nerd is cool, or at the very least it's mainstream. And when I was 14, 15, I was literally exactly the age that Peter Parker is in this movie, and only 2 years younger than he was, the character anyway, in the movie that came out at the time. Me and my high school friends we weren't like outcasts. We weren't like bullied and beaten up and stuff, but we kind of kept to ourselves and didn't really mesh much because being a nerd wasn't really all that cool. And nowadays it is consuming everything. I mean, the fact that we can be talking about the sixth Spider-Man movie, which is the third attempt at a Spider-Man series, which is the 16th movie in this enormous, before then not even feasible or imaginable giant franchise-crossing series. Like, that's evidence enough. And with so many of them selling over $1 billion in tickets, it's clear that being a nerd is acceptable and is a thing that people are just kind of generally cool with at this point. So doing a jocks versus nerds thing would look so hokey and out of date and out of touch that they had to rewrite it. So I appreciate that they went a different way with it. I appreciate it that not everyone was just some random white kid. The way that I heard it was that the writer, when asked about it, they were asking, like, so what made you decide on making I'm trying to remember which one's which, but like, what made you change all the races of all these characters? And the guy had said, like, well, I like to think I take my inspiration from reality. Works for me. So I think this was a great origin story for Spider-Man. I put that in quotes because it's not an origin story. Finally, we have a movie, the first movie for a character, and they do not spend time talking about how we got there. I actually don't think Uncle Ben gets name-checked once. It gets alluded to once or twice, but I don't think they ever actually say his name. And they don't retread on old ground. So we're not getting the same thing as, let's see if I can get all of these. Batman Forever also had a bit of it. Gotham, Batman Begins, Batman v Superman. Like, we have so many times we have to be reminded over and over and over again. All right, now here's the part where Thomas and Martha walk into the alley. Oh, here's Joe Chill and or the Joker, depending on which one you're reading or watching. Oh, and now they're dead. Oh, and now he's got his thing. He's afraid of Oh, now he's in the cave. He's going to be Batman. We get it. And it gets drawn out for like 5-10 minutes every single time. We know. Spider-Man, everybody knows Spider-Man. Everyone knows about Uncle Ben. And granted, part of that is thanks to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man back in 2002. But it's still, it's retreading old ground. Everybody knows about Spider-Man and Uncle Ben and all of that. So they do not waste time on it. It takes place, I think, about 8 months after Uncle Ben has died. And yeah, so what I mean when I say origin story is that we're focusing more on how Peter is coming to grips with his place in the Marvel world, his role in all of this, and how he's going to fit in with not just the people in his city, but also with the Avengers out there. And with the knowledge that aliens have attacked, he's kind of trying to assert himself and become a presence in that world. Now, I'm glad that they stuck with... I'm glad that they stuck with the more technological side of Spider-Man instead of the biological side of Spider-Man. I forget how much of this they actually confirmed in Civil War, but so it gets made clear in this movie that yes, it was a spider bite that got his senses all crazy, and now he has super strength and agility and stuff. But it's also, he has physical web shooters as opposed to Tobey Maguire's little wrist jizz thing. So you get to have him as a technological dude. He has his friend Ned, who I think is based on a character Ned Leeds, who I guess is also based, and is also a little bit draws more inspiration from, I'm going to mispronounce it, Ganke Lee, who's Miles Morales' best friend in the comics. And you kind of have the two of them sort of doing their thing. And it's just kind of funny because there's a moment where, as with all of these series, it gets suggested that, oh, well, Peter knows Spider-Man, and he's like, oh yeah, I know Spider-Man, yeah, kind of a thing. And now you've got him wrestling with, as a 15-year-old kid, wrestling with like, okay, so should I show off this power? Should I have to keep it secret? And his concern is more because he knows Aunt May will be pissed. But it's also like, does he use it to gain favor? Does he use it to stop being this bullied kind of loser kid in school? And while all this is going on, weaponry from various Avengers-related activity is starting to hit the sort of crime world around New York. You have, Chitauri weapons from the Battle for New York. I think there's mention of like Dark Elf stuff that was stolen from London. There's others, but so the idea is that at the end of the day, when all these battles go down, someone's got to go through and clean it up. And while Tony Stark has, possibly to match up with the Sokovia Accords from Captain America: Civil War, has bought out damage control, and they go in to scoop up everything and make sure that everything's all like tidied and whatever. But people are still finding these wreckages, and they're getting their hands on that equipment. Now, this got explored a little bit in the Marvel one-shot called, I think it was Item 47. Same general idea. Two thieves find a Chitauri gun, and they kind of go and do their thing. I think it was a Chitauri gun. I haven't seen that in a long time. But so the idea being, not only do they have alien tech on their hands and lots of different kinds, but they also have a crew of dudes. It's basically Adrian Toomes and his old salvage team are the bad guys, and they all kind of line up with a bunch of different characters that exist in the Marvel universe. But I don't really know that I want to spoil those right now because some of them might be pleasant surprises for you. I'm not going to, bother about saying Adrian Toomes is the Vulture because it gets made pretty damn clear right away, and it's been advertised all over the place. Anything that's explicit from like trailers, I'm gonna roll with. But So the idea being they're going on basically heists to steal more and more of the equipment, with the plan that like they're not really doing it to take over the world. They're not really doing it to, throw anybody into chaos. They're mostly just doing it because they feel like they were screwed by the big guy. The big guy in this case being Tony Stark, but it's the same kind of, how long do the little people, accept being kicked around before they decide to do something about it. So that's kind of where Toombs's mindset comes from and what the inspiration for him is. And there's a sense that when Peter finds out about this, he does sort of understand, like he gets that there's problems and stuff, but he's still fighting against it. It's still theft. It's still weapons that they're trying to sell to like gang members and stuff so they can make some money. Like it's still a criminal organization. Spider-Man still wants to help, much to the chagrin of Tony Stark, who is trying to keep him grounded, as he says. He feels really guilty about what Spider-Man has gotten himself into with the whole thing with the Civil War. Peter's excited to go for the next mission, and Tony's like, "No, kid, you're like 15. I can't be putting you in harm's way like that again. You should stay here. When you're ready, we can come and grab you," kind of a thing. And Peter's not really all that interested, and that's kind of what gets him involved in all of this stuff. I think the characters overall were awesome. I was smiling ear to ear the entire movie. I was just like loving that, and just like, it was crazy stuff. A lot of creative new takes on Spider-Man. It's also a Spider-Man that feels a bit more powerful or capable of being more powerful than the other ones. The Raimi Spider-Man didn't have a whole lot he could necessarily do. He could fire webs. That was it. And climb walls as well and stuff like that. At least with the Amazing Spider-Man one, there were like opportunities for that character to grow and have more stuff going on. You see him building his web shooters in the first one, so like he's obviously like you see that stuff kind of happening. You actually get to see some of like the web fluid stuff going on in this one too. So like there's a lot of cool stuff there. It's good to see a character that is getting started out young enough where you get to see him grow. We'll hopefully have Spider-Man for a really long time. And by Spider-Man, I mean both the character and also Tom Holland. I think he did fantastic. And I think before I jump into the spoilers, one last thing. A big concern a lot of people have had going into this movie was, is it going to be a Spider-Man movie, or is it going to be like Iron Man with Spider-Man also there? And I can say at this point that it is a Spider-Man movie. Tony's appearances in the trailers constitute, I would say, 30 to 40% of his entire screen time in the movie. He really only shows up for a couple minutes in a couple scenes, and that's about it. He's an important character in the overall plot, but he is not an agent of a lot of that stuff. He is kind of a reference point more than anything else. So you can feel confident in going to see that and not being worried that it's actually really an Iron Man movie in disguise. Spoiler time. Jump to here if you want to skip the spoilers. Okay, I just finished saying that Spider-Man Homecoming is a Spider-Man movie and not an Iron Man movie, and that is almost entirely true. This is actually in many ways two movies put together, which is convenient because the whole point of Spider-Man is him trying to balance his personal life and his superhero life. So in that same sense, he's trying to balance his personal life and the upcoming Homecoming and his superhero life, where he's trying desperately to impress Tony enough to let him go and be Spider-Man with the Avengers. And in many ways, that second movie really is Iron Man 4. So the reason I say that is not because Tony is all over the movie, because he isn't. The issue is because Tony... Because, all right, so let's walk through the previous Iron Man movies. You have Iron Man, where Tony Stark... where Tony Stark is sort of in the way of his father's best friend's path to take over the company, and he's kind of getting in the way of him taking those weapons away. And Obadiah Stane is a very personal villain created by Tony Stark unintentionally. Iron Man 2, you have another former associate of Howard Stark who was thrown in jail, got very sick, and now you have Ivan Vanko, who is a very personal villain that Tony has created for himself unintentionally. And he mocked him and did all sorts of stuff with that. Iron Man 3, you have him kind of ignoring and pissing off Aldrich Killian, who winds up being a very personal villain because of Tony Stark unintentionally. In all three cases, they are villains that are one or two oh my God, I lost the 6 degrees of separation. There we go. Holy shit. They're only 1 or 2 degrees separated from him, but they're very personal sort of villains in that they all have some direct connection to him, and their turn to darkness usually has something specifically to do with Tony. In this movie, the Vulture is not really a Spider-Man villain. In this case, he's actually really more of an Iron Man villain. And right off the bat, he turns to a life of crime because they're cleaning up the Avengers Tower aftermath after the Avengers won, and Tony Stark has sent in a company that he now owns to go clean up the mess and kick them out, and they're going to lose all their money that they were going to make from that, and they've all got families and shit. So they decide to turn to a life of crime so that they can actually afford to take care of their families and stuff. One thing that I really liked about this movie is that Spider-Man is pretty much exclusively fighting against dudes in powered suits. You have 3 different people that he's up against the most. The first one, and the one that's more of an emotional kind of a battle, is Tony himself. He's just trying to get the attention. He's looking at him as sort of a mentor or father figure. They actually retconned, in Iron Man 2, there's a spot, Tony comes down, Tony's like fighting off all the hammer bots, and this one kid is in the crossfire, and he's got an Iron Man mask on, and he goes like this to go shoot a thing, and Tony goes down behind him and goes, blow, and the hammer bot blows up, and he runs past him and goes like, good shooting, kid, and then like flies away. They retcon that, now that's Peter. That was always Peter, according to the retcon. Doesn't get mentioned in this movie, which is sort of a bummer. I was kind of hoping there'd just be like one little something, but so they have that, and he's just trying to prove to him that he's good enough to be an Avenger. The second one is the two different characters who go by the Shocker, which is a Marvel villain, and it's sort of this electrified gauntlet kind of thing, and it's like punch, and it has this strong like taser kind of a zap, and it like blasts stuff away. So another one where it's like, here's a modified kind of armor piece that's being used there, and it's actually not too dissimilar from, I want to say Ivan Vanko actually had something along those lines in a couple of his scenes too. And of course the big one is the Vulture. And what's interesting is, and I mentioned this to Sarah and she didn't think it stood out as much, but I thought it stood out a lot, was when you're watching a movie that has Iron Man, that had Iron Man, War Machine, the Ironmonger, and I guess that was probably it. I think those are the only 3 that it really applied to. Whenever you're seeing one of those guys in Iron Man style armor specifically, there is occasionally a shot, and I guess they messed around with it a bit in Avengers 2 also with the Hulkbuster armor, but there's occasionally, what they'll do is if they want to look at, say, Tony, they're not going to look necessarily just to the mask, but if you want to see his facial expression, they do this kind of a dark head in a void thing where he can like turn and stuff, but it's his head in darkness and it's lit up by the HUD in front of his face. They do that with Tony, they do that with Rhodey, they did that with Obadiah. In this movie, they do that exact same thing with Adrian Toomes. They see him, so he wears kind of a flight suit, bomber jacket sort of thing, and he has like one of those air mask, kind of like a breathing mask tube that you'd see in like a fighter jet, like a fighter pilot kind of suit. But you have that same thing. It's him with a head in a void, and there's green light on him, and it was very neat to see that, in my opinion, on the metaphorical side, where it's like he is sort of fighting an Iron Man villain, and it's someone who was created by Tony specifically. And even still, while all this is going on, Toomes doesn't really care about Peter all that much. He's not really all that concerned with him, except that he's kind of messing up his stuff. He's more concerned with sticking it to Tony. He essentially wants to be an Iron Man villain, but he's stuck being a Spider-Man villain. So I thought that all of that was really cool. And it's sort of, here's Iron Man. He created a bad guy, and now he's just fucked off to somewhere, and it's up to Spider-Man to fix it. And between Tony being busy as always and Happy not really being all that interested in talking to Peter, he kind of gets ignored and gets the cold shoulder every time he's trying to get some attention to be like, hey, I need some help. I thought that the immediate gags about Spider-Man 1 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 back-to-back were really great. In the Washington Monument, there's a point where the rest of his classmates, including Liz Allen, a girl that he's into, the elevator blows up and starts to fall, and he goes and he's like saving everyone in the elevator. And first they have a Spider-Man 1 gag where he's hanging upside down, and the AI that's in his suit is like, you should kiss her. And he's just like hanging upside down, and he's like, wait, what? And she's just kind of looking. So it's a nice reference to the Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst kiss from Spider-Man 1. And then also, immediately before that, she's the last one in the elevator, and the elevator drops all of a sudden, so he shoots a web down to try to save her. And in Amazing Spider-Man 2, that didn't work out so well, but in this one, he gets her by the hand. He just kind of gets that and is hanging on like that, so she doesn't slam her head into the bottom and die instantly. So that's good. This movie has one of the biggest twists that I've seen in a superhero movie in a long time. If you don't want to hear it, I recommend jumping forward about 30 seconds. And the big thing being that, so it's time for homecoming. He's asked Liz out. And she said yes. And they're headed to the thing. And he gets dropped off by Aunt May. They go to the door. Door opens. Adrian Toomes standing right there. Now, that happens in the first thing I'm thinking is like, oh shit, he found out who Peter is, and now he's kidnapped Liz. And it's like, something's off about this. And it turns out, no, it's much worse than that. He is actually her dad. Holy shit. That immediately brought to mind Spider-Man 1, the whole Osborn thing. It was a really good way of kind of bringing it all back. And this is the spoiler I was talking about earlier, where like once again, it's 1 degree it's like 1.5 degrees of separation, but it's not something that's in play the entire time. It's not someone he's got a personal history with. It just happens to be the dad of the girl that he's into. So I think that's pretty cool. It was a great twist. I was really happy to see that. And it actually factors in to other parts of the plot. On the way to homecoming, so Peter knows Adrian is the Vulture. He knew that the whole time. But he doesn't know, the Vulture doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man. So on the way to homecoming, Liz just kind of keeps sort of dropping all these hints about like, yeah, you keep disappearing at these weird times. And it takes all like 2 minutes for him to realize that like, oh shit, this is Spider-Man. So Liz gets out and he's like, I'm just going to have a quick talk with him for a sec, and pulls out the gun, and he basically says like, look, I'm giving you an opportunity to walk away right now. You saved my daughter's life. I appreciate that, and I need to repay that favor to you. So you know what? I'm not going to kill you right now. You go in there, you show my daughter a good time, and you leave me alone, and we'll be fine. So it's kind of a neat character moment for Toomes, where it's like he does have some sense of honor and a sense of like, look, I don't really want to be killing people. I just am trying to like take care of my family. So you get to see a little bit more of that, and it actually even comes back at the very end of it all. I loved the final fight that they had. It was absolutely brutal. There's the point where the wings take out a building and drop down all this concrete on him, which on the one hand gives us the best emotional moment I've seen out of Spider-Man ever, where he is just screaming for his life and is just terrified. and you can see that he's like on the brink of losing it, and finally he sees his own like he took off his own mask. He sees it in a puddle, and he sees his reflection in the thing, and he's just kind of like, he just takes a deep breath, and he's like, "Come on, Spider-Man! Come on, Spider-Man!" It's like it's a really interesting moment to see Peter like be like, "I can do this. I just need to focus." I like that. What I did not like is that when he gets up and moves away the columns, it is the worst looking physical, like practical effect I've seen in a long time in a superhero movie. Like, it was so obviously styrofoam, like whatever. I don't know if it's just because the shot started like a half second early, but you see him kind of like it like goes down a little bit first and up, and like it just looks fake. I feel bad that was such a bad piece of practical effect, because it could have been it took a really powerful scene out of the moment for a second. But the final fight then out on the beach, it's Peter and him. They're on a plane. He's able to pull the plane to just barely get the thing to crash into the sand. And it turns out, hey, this is an Avengers plane. They're moving all the Avengers stuff over to the new headquarters. And so it's full of Avengers tech. And so Toomes is trying to like get all this stuff up. And the fight is such a brutal one between the two of them that he finally gets his hands on a bunch of arc reactors, and he's about to go fly off. And Peter looks and sees like, yo, your wingsuit is like busted. It's sparking and stuff. And he keeps trying to grab the box and take it away from him. And Toomes just keeps grabbing, picking it up. And he's like, you lost, get over it. And Peter's like, your wingsuit's going to explode. I'm just trying to save you. And he doesn't let him. And boom, it explodes. And there's a big fireball. And I will be honest, I thought for a second that they were going to leave him dead. Like he was going to die in that thing by his own hubris, the same way as many Spider-Man villains in the past. Green Goblin, Doc Ock. I guess those are the only two that have really... I don't even remember the lizard fight at all. But then he's like, nope, I'm still going in. So he runs into a raging inferno, comes out with Toomes, puts him on the side. There's a little note. I think that's cute. And there is at the end of the movie, after the initial part of the credits, there is a long tail of stuff that ends in a little stinger, and that is because Mac Gargan, who was part of the I think he was part of the crew. I think he was part of the crew with Toomes, and not just one of the dudes who's trying to sell to. But he asks, like, yo, I hear you know who Spider-Man is. And Toomes is like, if I knew that, I would have killed him myself, and walks away. And I thought that was a really cool moment because, one, he's walking to his family. And I think basically it's a combination of he's repaying Spider-Man not just for saving his life, but also because he essentially spared his wife and daughter from the grief of losing him altogether. Because in the end, the most important thing to Toomes is still his family, and his employees, who he treats like family. I think they did a really good job of a very human bad guy who's not just like, you know what, I'm going to wake up today and I'm just going to destroy the world. Screw it. Like, this is a guy who's got motivations. He's got actual personal, meaningful, human sort of things. So that was kind of neat. I really like that. I am wondering if they're going to try to fix the issue of stories in New York that don't involve the Defenders, because not like just about any of this stuff would have been in the Defenders' purview, but like some of the stuff that the Defenders are working on could potentially be stuff that Spider-Man could have heard about or found out about or whatever. Like, I would love nothing more than there to be some involvement of Spider-Man in one or more of the Netflix shows. I don't want him to be the cavalry, because while Spider-Man doesn't have a huge amount of powers on his own, especially without the suit, he definitely outclasses all four of the Defenders in terms of like just getting around and stuff. Like, it takes nothing for him to escape. I'd say Matt could maybe throw his baton and like maybe have a chance at knocking out a Web, but Spider-Man could get away very easily. So I don't want him to enter into that and suddenly be like way overpowering the Defenders, but he's still doing the low level thing. It'd be nice to see him show up somewhere in there, and have some kind of impact. So that was very cool. There's also the reveal of this series' version of Mary Jane Watson, who is not Mary Jane Watson. She is MJ, better known as Michelle Jones, who is fucking hilarious, played by Zendaya, or Zendaya. I don't actually know how to pronounce her name. That was a great reveal. I kind of had a feeling early on, just based on how they were shooting her and how she was involved in all this stuff. I'm greatly looking forward to seeing more of her and Tom Holland in the next one. That was a really cool stuff there. I'm trying to think what else I can talk about before I get out of spoiler mode. Let's see. Oh, the Tinkerer is part of the crew. That was pretty cool. Played by the big dude who just wants to make that high altitude vacuum seal. But yeah, I thought that stuff was pretty cool. Ned finding out about Spider-Man early on and the two of them kind of being like buddies with a secret is hilarious, even though Ned keeps blabbing it to people. The end of the movie is great. The last shot of Peter back with his old suit again, or his Tony enhanced suit again, and just like, takes off the mask and there's Aunt May with the what the fuck, and it's great. It's awesome. I didn't even talk about that. Marisa Tomei as Aunt May is great. She's a lot of fun. She's sort of almost like a big sister kind of a character, which makes more sense nowadays. I think if your guardian is an aunt who's like 20 years older, maybe, like you're probably going to have a bit more of like a friendly relationship and like a siblingy kind of thing than anything else. She's fantastic. I love the jokes everyone makes about Marisa Tomei being like super hot and everyone wants to hang out with her and stuff, because Marisa Tomei is pretty awesome. And I have loved everything I think I've ever seen her in, come to think of it. So I think that's about it. I think that's all of the spoilery stuff. I like that we got to see what I assume will be the Spider-Man suit for Avengers Infinity War. That'll be neat. I love that Gwyneth Paltrow is back. There were rumors going around that she was done with these movies, but it like she kept having scheduling conflicts when both Captain America Civil War and Avengers 2 were going on, so they just had to kind of refer to her offhand. I don't know if the same is true of Natalie Portman, because she's not in Thor Ragnarok as far as I'm aware. I mean, we'll see if that happens, but so that was cool. I love the reference to like, I've had this ring since 2008. Like, all of that is great. All of it's great. And I feel for Tony, since right now it's him, Rhodey, who's still recovering from being mostly paralyzed, and the Vision, and they are the Avengers right now. Like, it's actually kind of ironic that the Avengers officially on paper are basically the same crew that was working on stuff back in Iron Man 2 and Vision. So yeah. Actually, no. You know what? Isn't Black Widow also? I think Black Widow is also still with Tony. I can't remember. I think though. Yeah, I don't remember. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see where this stuff goes. I think we're gonna throw it back out of spoilers again in just a sec here. Okay, closing thoughts. Spider-Man Homecoming is awesome. I think they did an amazing job with their villain. I think they did a great job with their surrounding cast. The high school feels like a real high school. Finally, it doesn't feel like this fucking Hollywoodized whatever thing. That bothered me a lot back in the Raimi days. Just so like this one has a real feeling to it. It feels like a populated high school with people in clubs and things. There was a lot of attention to detail to make it really feel genuine. Out of all 6 Spider-Man movies we've had so far, it is at minimum in the top 3. Honestly, I don't think I'd have trouble really saying that it's probably the best Spider-Man movie we've gotten so far. I know Spider-Man 1 and 2 from the Sam Raimi series are usually considered in the 1 and 2 slot. I think Homecoming beats it. It's hilarious. It's very well paced. There's a lot of great action. There's a lot of good character development. There's so much that I haven't talked about, and I want to like let people kind of experience it for themselves. It's a really great movie. I loved it. I am so excited for the next one. I think he's going to be in Avengers Infinity War, and then also in the follow-up to that, whatever that gets titled. According to Kevin Feige, Avengers 4, whatever that winds up being called, is going to be the end of this 22-movie arc that is going on right now that started with Iron Man 1, and then Spider-Man Homecoming 2, whatever that winds up being called, is the start of something new. Whether that means a bunch of the original core Avengers are going to die, I don't know. It's entirely possible. I can't imagine they're going to get through that without any bloodshed, but we will see what happens there. I am so excited. Once again, I feel like, Marvel just keeps hitting home run after home run. Not that like all of their movies are perfect. There's definitely some, Hulk, Thor 2, even in some ways Ant-Man, Cap 1. There's a lot where there's some kind of weaknesses, but overall, most of them are great, and they've really been getting better and better, generally speaking, over time. I hope it does really well at the box office. I can't imagine that it won't. It's gotten like a 92, 93, something like that on Rotten Tomatoes. I loved it. I highly, highly recommend it. I'm sorry that there's probably been a bunch of like quick cuts of me. I've been doing reviews all day, and the camera's overheating. So, but yeah, Tom Holland was a great Spider-Man, and I can't wait to see a lot more of him. I definitely am thinking about going to see this movie again. So check it out. If you're a Spider-Man fan, if you're a Marvel fan, either of those, it'll be great. Yeah, I think that's about it. Cool. Bye.
There's a ton of other subsystems in here, but they're all disabled by the training wheels protocol.
I'm sick of Mr. Stark treating me like a kid.
But you are a kid.
Yeah, a kid who can stop a bus with his bare hands.